Good afternoon and welcome to this, the annual meeting of the Nottinghamshire Police and Crime Panel. The first item of business for today is the appointment of the Chair and Vice Chair for the 2022-23 municipal year. I'll shortly ask for nominations for the role of Chair, and any prospective Chair will need to be proposed and seconded. Once all nominations for the position of Chair have been received, the members of the panel will take a vote. The newly appointed Chair will come up to the dais and take control, leading the same process for the appointment of the Vice Chair. Let's just try and solve the echo. Okay. Please may I invite members of the panel to make any nominations for the role of Chair. Mr. Vaughan Newton.
Thank you. I would like to nominate Christine Goldstraw, OBE.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I'd like to second that nomination. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further nominations for the role of Chair? In that case, may we please take that to the vote? All those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? Thank you. That's carried, and I'll invite Christine to come and take the chair.
Sorry. No, it's all right. It was done deliberately. First of all, may I thank members and hope that I live up to your expectations as your chair for the forthcoming year. I'm sure you'll tell me if I don't. We seem to have an echo, and we will try and resolve that. It's a little disconcerting, I think. I'm not sure if it's because this is on. Has that stopped it? No? Let's just try it one more time. No, we've still got it. Is it okay now? Is that better?
That's the one.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. If I could then propose from the chair, Councillor Ellis as the vice chair. Thank you, Mr. Vaughan. All those in favour? Thank you. Any abstentions? Anyone against? And the motion's carried. Thank you. That takes us to item 3, but before I launch into what comments you may have about the minutes, it would be remiss if we didn't offer absolute, sincere and wonderful congratulations to some deserved medals in the Queen's recent birthday honours list. Delighted that Deputy Chief Constable Rachel Barber is with us today so that we can all congratulate her on the awarding of the Queen's personal message, the Queen's Police Medal, as it's known. But the main congratulations to you. And another name that will be very familiar with members of the panel, and that's Dave Wakelin, who I think was awarded an OBE, is that correct? MBE, thank you, MBE. And so give our congratulations to Dave Wakelin. Many of us have come across Dave over many years and rightly justified in terms of his contribution, particularly to youth and young people. And I don't know this person, and I'll look to the Chief Constable for some help, but I understand that Mr. Alan Marwood has received some particular commendation. Perhaps you'd like to report that, Chief Constable.
Yeah, I think Alan's probably the longest serving special that we've ever had, and he still volunteers for the ambulance service and the police service, and he was awarded an honour last time round, and I'm pretty sure that he collected that probably about 2 months ago now. So Mr. Marwood is our sort of go-to person in the specials, and he got an MBE.
Thank you. Well, would you give all of them our sincerest congratulations, and I'm sure through the Commissioner she'll ensure that whatever party is appropriate duly takes place in due course. So thank you for that. If we can move then to the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of March, which seems a very long time ago now, doesn't it? I'll take any corrections or any matters arising at the same time. Mrs. Harding.
On page 8, it's halfway down the page. It says this was the first time that the unit had received multi-year finding. I assume that's multi-year funding?
Yes, I think so. Thank you for pointing that out. We'll get that put in a correction. Thank you. Any other comments on those minutes, please? In that case, can I put forward the motion that those are approved with that one amendment? Thank you. Got 2 or 3 seconders there. Thank you. And that takes us to item 3, the confirmation hearing held on the 20th of April, which was for the post of Chief Finance Officer. First of all, can I check if there are any corrections or any issues anyone wants to raise at this point? Perhaps it's the appropriate time to just ask the Commissioner if you've got a confirmatory date of start, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. We're currently working to the beginning of August. Thank you.
Thank you. That was your hope and expectation. I just wanted to check it was still on course. Thank you very much. Can I propose those from the Chair as accepted? Thank you very much. 3 councillors there. That takes us to apologies for absence.
Thank you. We have an apology today from Mayor Abrahams from Mansfield District Council. We also have Councillor Edwards here from Nottingham City Council, who's substituting for Councillor Woodings.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That takes us to item 5, declarations of interest by members and officers. First of all, any disposable pecuniary interests people wish to record? Nil, I think. And any private interests, pecuniary or non-pecuniary? None, I think. Thank you. That takes us to item 6, review of membership and balanced appointment objectives. And I'll look to our learned colleague here.
Thank you. You'll be fed up with me by the end of the afternoon. Now, we're required each year to review the panel's composition to make sure that it meets the balanced appointment objective, meaning it's reflected both the number of seats held by each party across the county, but also the control of the different councils. In reviewing the figures for this municipal year, the panel's current composition best meets the balanced appointment objective. The report also highlights any changes in appointed representatives to the panel. There have been 2 changes to report this year, which is Councillor Carlton replacing Councillor Camilleri as the 2nd Nottinghamshire County Council appointment, and Councillor Lee replacing Councillor Carlton as the Newark and Sherwood District Council appointment. The other appointment we need to confirm that we hadn't received at the time the agenda was published was Councillor Inglis' appointment for Rushcliffe Borough Council.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Then there are 2 recommendations that the panel agrees to retain the 11 elected members, and that changes to council representation on the panel as detailed in the paragraph, with the exception of obviously adding in Councillor Inglis's Rushcliffe. Can I propose those from the Chair? Thank you. Any objections? Thank you. Can we record our thanks to Councillor Camilleri and welcome formally, I think, Councillor Lee to the forum. Thank you. That takes us to item 7, the work programme. There's lots in here, so I'll ask Jo to make a start. Thank you.
Thank you. Mostly the reports as presented. Just a couple of things that we'd like to highlight. Firstly, the appendix of the work programme unfortunately wasn't circulated with the committee papers, but members have now been furnished with a hard copy and an electronic copy was circulated in the interim, so members should now have had sight of that. Other matters covered within the report to highlight for you. Firstly, the renewal of the subscription for the regional network is due. Members are asked to consider whether they wish to consider the panel's membership. The benefits of the network and the cost to renew that are highlighted within the report. We've also received details of the annual Police, Fire and Crime Panel Conference. Any members who would like to attend that, if you could please let me know, as there are limited spaces, particularly for the 2-day delegates. And finally, the other thing to highlight for members' information are the materials that have recently been published by the Home Office, providing guidance and support to panel members, which you may find useful to review. Other than that, just to highlight the recommendations and the other areas for information within the work programme report.
Thank you very much, Jo. Hopefully those of you who've seen these documents will see that there's a weighty one in terms of police and crime, fire and crime panel guidance, and two much shorter papers on the role of the chair and the role of supporting officer. And we'll perhaps bring something back to the committee in due course on how we might measure ourselves against some of those objectives that are in the report. There are 3 recommendations as outlined, that it's updated, the report is updated. The cost to the East Midlands regional network is £420. As you'll see, it's been a modest uplift. And anyone wishing to attend conference, to please let Jo know. If I propose those from the chair, can I, thank you, seconded and seconded. Anyone objections? No? Thank you very much. That takes us then to the work programme. Oh, we've just done that, haven't we? I'm getting ahead of myself. To the next item, which is the complaints and annual report. I'm going to hand over again to Jo to take us through this report, as she's the consistent member of the panel who's been privy to conversations with people in the IOPC and various other officers. So Jo, if you would take us through the important bits of this paper.
Thank you. This report updates the panel on complaints made about the Commissioner during the municipal year. In 21-22, a total of 14 complaints were received, 2 of which were in 2021 and were both outside the scope of the complaints scheme. A further 12 complaints have been received in this year, following the Commissioner's appearance in court on Tuesday the 3rd of May. Officers from the host authority have taken advice from the IOPC on this matter, which has confirmed that as the offence is the subject of ongoing criminal proceedings, it should not be pursued via the panel's complaints procedure, nor is it required to be referred to the IOPC either as a serious complaint or a conduct matter. The disposal of offences through criminal proceedings mean that they will remain outside the scope of the panel's arrangements for dealing with complaints and conduct matters once the court proceedings are completed. There's been discussion, as I say, with the IOPC to confirm their advice, and the contents of the report are there for members to note.
Thank you very much. We hadn't particularly anticipated any questions on this paper because the advice is pretty clear, but we do have an expert waiting on the line. In case there's any questions, it's appropriate to go to the expert rather than our trying to second guess. So can I just, first of all, ask you to note, as Joe has said, the report is for noting. Councillor Edwards, you wish to raise something?
So let me put the microphone on. That's more helpful for people. I do apologise. Yeah, the recommendations are there. The paragraph 14 makes it clear that about the court proceedings concluding on the 19th of July. I think since it is a public meeting, people will know that those of us who are elected and who are held to account for our conduct, we know that there are political proceedings to go through once this situation is resolved in court. And until then, I don't think we need to say any more. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. You've expressed that most eloquently. Thank you. In that case, can I just record that we note the contents of the report? All those in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Thank you. That very quickly takes us to item 9, Welcome Commissioner to the Commissioner's Update Report. If I can hand over to you.
Many thanks, Chair, and congratulations on your reappointment, and to Councillor Ellis too. Members of the Police and Crime Panel, before my update is presented to you, I think it's only right to formally acknowledge the matter of the court case in which I'm involved as a private citizen, given that some of the information is already in the public domain. Unfortunately, because this matter has not formally been concluded at court, I cannot discuss it or take questions on the matter, because I have to avoid any possible interference with the judicial outcome of the case, which will be concluded in approximately 6 weeks' time. What I am able to do, however, is to restate the apology that's been publicly reported already. I'm very ashamed, embarrassed, and sorry. I remain passionate about fulfilling the responsibilities expected of me as the Police and Crime Commissioner for Nottinghamshire. To that end, I now turn to my formal update to the panel, which details the progress against the 3 main objectives of preventing, responding and supporting within my police and crime plan. I hand over now to my Head of Strategy and Performance, Dan Howitt, who will take you through the report in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. This paper provides the panel with an update on progress made against the Commissioner's delivery plan since March, and it includes the final performance and insight report for the 2021-22 financial year, which is the information that we use to help inform the Commissioner's annual report, which is now in preparation and will be reported in full to the panel in September. So, as usual, we have a wide range of sort of good news stories and areas for improvement identified in the report. I'm sure you'll have read it, so I'll just quickly cover a selection of the highlights. In terms of positive exceptions, our police and crime survey continues to show some of the lowest levels of neighbourhood crime being experienced by residents in Nottinghamshire since the survey began in 2017. So only 4.8% of respondents reported being the victim of vehicle crime, burglary, robbery or theft from person in the last year. Police recorded burglaries, meanwhile, are down 37% compared to the 2019-2020 pre-COVID baseline year. Some of this is clearly a result of the changes in lifestyles that we've seen following the pandemic, but our Safer Streets programmes and the work of our burglary and robbery prevention teams have also clearly played an important part. In terms of responding, so we've got the call handling performance, which was published last week as part of the Home Office's Beating Crime Plan, which showed Nottinghamshire to have the second best 999 call answering performance in the country. So 89% of 999 calls being answered within 10 seconds and an average call answering time of around 6 seconds for the emergency service. Response times to incidents have also remained consistently strong, with the force reaching around 75% of emergencies within 15 minutes. And of course, the control room is now also offering online reporting, callbacks, and a live chat facility, which are all helping to improve access and better manage incoming demand. In terms of supporting, we're pleased to report that the proportion of people receiving victim support services that report improvements in their ability to cope and recover from harm has increased significantly over the last year. It's risen from 67.8% to 81.8%. And we know that outcomes from victim support services have been heavily affected by the impact of the COVID pandemic, both in terms of the demand on services, the increase in complexity of cases presenting, and the growing demand for longer-term support. So it's really pleasing to see that we're now seeing those improvements in outcomes and a gradual return to the norm. So conversely, just moving on to the areas for improvement that have been highlighted as part of the report, particular areas of concern being the rising levels of violence with injury, which the Performance Insight report shows is up 25%, and the rise in violent knife crime, up 15%. I think a return to the norm was expected as the nighttime economy reopened, but the last quarter in particular saw some sort of sporadic rises in knife crime, which are over and above the level expected. I think now, because this concerns some rather small numbers, we do tend to see these sort of random clusters and fluctuations over time, but we're very closely monitoring these figures in the event that it signifies an emerging trend. But I think, in all honesty, it's perhaps too early to say whether it does or doesn't at this stage. That said, we are undertaking some sort of focused work around the city centre, where the majority of offences are concentrated, having recently published the city's nighttime economy needs assessment, which has been recently shared with partners, and we're in the process of convening a partnership meeting with key stakeholders to discuss the various recommendations which are touched upon in the report at paragraph 3.11. Also, in terms of prevention, we've identified opportunities to improve the provision of general crime prevention to victims. This has been identified both through the Commissioner's Police and Crime Survey, which found that the proportion of victims receiving general crime prevention advice has fallen over the last year, against a rise in those stating that they would have liked to have received crime prevention advice and information. And also HMIC's recent Peel inspection report, which flags some opportunities to improve advice on crime prevention and preserving evidence at the scene in the Force Service Centre. I think it's probably important to highlight that the focus on crime, high-risk crime prevention, it remains extremely high, particularly in terms of the use of domestic violence protection orders and notices. Again, this is something that was highlighted as a strength for the force as part of the Peel inspection. But there do appear to be opportunities to improve that kind of general crime prevention offer, which we'll be exploring as part of the Commissioner's Accountability Board, and indeed, recently, this was recently discussed at their last meeting in May. The final area for improvement to highlight here is, again, one that was flagged by HMIC as part of their Peel inspection, and that's the need to strengthen crime recording standards. HMIC estimate that around 86.4% of reported crime is being captured by the force, falling to around 83.6% for violence against the person offences. And again, this is something that the Commissioner will be carefully scrutinising as part of her monthly accountability board meetings. So just very briefly, in terms of other developments outlined in the paper, which I think are worth a very quick mention, the Serious Violence Strategic Needs Assessment and Response Strategy, which was approved by the Violence Reduction Board in March, and the Independent Victims Needs Assessment, which has now been completed and is due to be published later this month. This has identified a wide range of recommendations for us, which are summarised for you in paragraph 5.2, and it's obviously a critical product in terms of informing the commissioning of our new victim care services and restorative justice services in the autumn. So that's a brief roundup really of the key points from our perspective. Some very strong and encouraging performance, but also some clear areas of focus for the coming year that will be reflected in both the Commissioner's annual report and the annual delivery plan.
Thank you very much, Jan, and First of all, we would be remiss if we didn't give the Chief Constable a pat on the back for being the second best in the country for the 999 calls. I think that's an extremely well-deserved and well-earned. Thank you for that. And thank you, Commissioner, for leading on that as well. Can I invite colleagues for any questions they'd like to put to the Commissioner? I've got Councillor McRae first, and I think Councillor Smith. I'm making note of those.
Thank you. The report refers to the county experiencing one of the highest levels of police recorded knife crime recorded in 6 years. The performance information also shows an increase of other violence offences, an increase of 25.3%. What reassurance have you had from the Chief Constable that this is a true picture of the rate of violent crime, including knife crime, and the number of actual incidents isn't even higher and just masked by the recording issues identified in the peer review? And given this increase, what assurance can you give the panel about the effectiveness and impact of interventions that have been put in place and the support services that you have commissioned?
Thank you very much, Councillor McRae. Nationally, there's been an increase in knife crime too. It's not just been in Nottinghamshire. You know, nighttime economy has started up again, and I think that has affected things. You ask about the quality of the crime recording. We are really all over that. At the accountability meetings, it's something we're really asking questions about, and I've got reassurances that things have been put in place to make sure that all crime is recorded.
Did you want to come back, Councillor McRae?
Yeah, I think it fits in with the knife crime bit. I was just going to say, would the Commissioner be willing to organise a meeting with NET, the NET, the tram people, and Broxtowe Police and councillors to discuss the rise in issues of antisocial behaviour and knife crime reports from youngsters using the tram to get to and away from various locations around Broxtowe, issues on the tram's platforms and on the actual tram itself, because something's got to be done. It's getting really bad in Broxtowe.
Thank you, Councillor McRae. I'm sure we can get together with the Neighbourhood Inspector, Mike Ebbins, who's excellent as well, and I'm very happy to have a meeting.
Is that okay, Councillor McRae, or did you want... Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith, thank you, and then I've got Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. I think one's more aimed at the Commissioner and one's more aimed at the Chief Constable, just because it's for a bit of clarity. The first one to the Commissioner is, Commissioner Henry, do you know when we are due to hear back on the next stage of the Safe Streets funding? Is my first question. The second one, more to the Chief Constable or one of his officers, is around parking offences, because it's so frustrating as members. We get hear from members of the public all the time that they've rung something through to the police and the police have said it's the council's responsibility and the council say it's the police's responsibility. Can you give a little bit of clarity of whose responsibility what is? I don't know if it's for this or if you can email something out, but it would make our lives a lot easier. Thank you, Chair.
I can answer the first one. We're due to find out Safer Streets officially in June. I wouldn't be at all surprised if it wasn't the beginning of July, because often these things slide. But we've got 4 really strong bids in, which is very ambitious. But if you don't ask, you don't get. And we've got a good record in Nottinghamshire of showing the money we spend makes a difference to people. I mean, you've seen the work we've done together in Ashfield, Councillor, and you've seen the results that people feel safer and the fantastic feedback we've had. So really strong bids in. We're lobbying like mad as well. So fingers crossed for all 4. But it is ambitious. You think? My chief exec is confirming it's likely to be July. It was officially going to be June to start with, but has it slid? Yeah, okay, thank you. I wasn't surprised it was sliding already. That's a very operational question regarding parking. That's not my expertise. Whether the chief wants to come back at a later time.
So I'll give you the details, but it very much depends on where you are, what the council provision is, and if it's dangerous or not. But I'll email you.
Thank you. Could I just follow up Councillor Smith's comment? Thank you. Your first comment, which was about the bids for feeling safer. And I've read what's in the report now, and obviously it's really good that people feel safe. But I wonder down track, are you thinking of sort of different targets against which you would measure all this investment? I mean, if you feel safer, that's good, but it is a perception, isn't it? And different people will react differently. And I wondered if there's any thought to kind of harder targets against which we could measure that in the future. I don't expect you to answer that now. Thank you. Can I go to Councillor Lee? Thank you.
Thank you. The last time I was here was about a year ago, and I wanted to ask this question before this. Hopefully I can squeeze it into what is in front of us. The Manchester Police Crime Inspector reversed his decision to close his custody suites in Greater Manchester as he wanted more police on streets and less police on seats. I'm wondering if you're keeping the facilities open for if a new police inspector in the future decides to reverse the decision in closing the custody suites.
Are you referring to the custody suites in Newark specifically? Thank you. The custody suites in Newark have been closed for some time. And currently there's no need for those custody suites, and we are using those custody suites for different reasons now.
So my question is are these custody suites, would they be available if the decision was reversed in the future to be reused or not?
Thank you.
If I might come in, Chair, please. So custody provision is an operational decision for Chief Constable. He acts as strategic policing advisor to the Commissioner. So at present he's provided assurance that we've got sufficient custody provision. That said, they are available as mothballed facilities.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Was that the answer you wanted, Councillor? Good, thank you. Can we go then to Councillor Greaves, and then have Councillor Ellis, and then Mrs Harding? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations to being reappointed as Chairman. On page 36, paragraph 3.4 and paragraph 3.6, you're saying about a reduction in burglaries in Worksop South in paragraph 3.6. Worksop South is just a small area of Worksop. Can you tell me why that was identified, while on the other hand, all Mansfield was identified? Can you tell me why one portion of Worksop has been identified with a 26% reduction in burglary, please? Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to pass this over to Dan because it's a question to do with the bid for the safe streets. Thank you.
It was all part of an evidence-led process which looked at feelings of safety, experience of crime per head of population, and I believe that the area in Mansfield that was targeted is actually it doesn't cover the whole of Mansfield as far as I'm aware. Is that correct? It's a very so they're all based on lower super output areas. They're all quite targeted localities, and we can share the sort of the specific geography of the areas that were selected with you outside of this meeting, if that's helpful. But yeah, just to confirm, it's not the whole of Mansfield that's being targeted as part of that initiative. It's by the nature of the Safer Streets programme, they are very targeted hotspots that we focus on.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Greaves?
Yes, Chair. I'm even more confused than first I asked. Worksop South is only a very, very small area of Worksop. And then on here, you've got Mansfield. You don't mention a small area of Mansfield. You mention Mansfield. So my question again is, how come you've got the evidence for just a small area of Worksop, which is Worksop South, and not of the rest of Worksop, Worksop North, Worksop East, Worksop North East, Worksop West. How come there's none of that evidence on here? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, it's not here because those weren't the areas that were selected, but we do have a profile of all of those areas across the whole of Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, which will have ranked all of these areas in terms in order of experience of crime, fear of crime, and we can share the actual the workings with you, which produced a full ranking of it. Clearly. The majority were clustered in Nottingham City, but there was a decision made to take a broad selection of the priority hotspot localities from across the whole force area, and Worksop South was clearly identified as a higher priority area than Worksop North, and I can share we can share the workings with you if that's helpful.
Thank you. It sounds perhaps as if there's a little bit of a gap in dialogue that might have made this a little more clear. Perhaps you'd think about that after the meeting. Just sounds as if there was a missing link in discussing it with key elected members. So I'll leave that for you to dwell on. Councillor Ellis next, please, and then Mrs Harding.
Thank you, Chair. I want to come back to the Peel report and the question of data integrity. I think we found that a very disappointing report. Unreliable data undermines everything that's in the performance report. So how can we believe what we're being told? It says in the Peel report that the force did not appreciate its performance was poor, and the force's senior leadership was not aware of the aspects of crime recording that need to be improved. It's not sufficient for you to say, for the Commission to say, we're all over this. I think we want to know what steps are being taken to address the data integrity issue, which, as I say, undermines everything that we're being told. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. We are talking about this, the accountability meeting, which is a formal meeting which we're having once a month and asking for evidence of this improving.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Ellis?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't think that's much of an answer to my question, what you're doing about data integrity. But since you've raised the accountability board, which I know you made a bit of a song and dance about in the media, how does that differ from the previous arrangements?
It's a much more formal, minuted meeting. It's planned in advance, like we have our work programme we have our police and crime panel meetings. We're planning in advance what we're going to be speaking about every month, checking against the plan for the police and crime plan, and checking against the areas for improvement on the Magistrates Inspectorate report. So it will be a planned meeting, and also it gives us evidence that we're actually moving things forward, and it's all minuted.
You're a third of the way through your term. Can you tell us what you've done for the last year?
Lots. we have more police officers now than we've had for the last 10 years. I've brought more funding in for safer streets than any other police and crime commission in Nottinghamshire.
No, I mean specifically in terms of holding the Chief Constable to account.
We've been having our regular meetings, but actually I want to do more. But I've had a very small team, so as I'm building my team up, it gives me more capacity to do more of this.
I think what you're saying is you've changed or developed the process by which you hold the Chief Constable account in the creation of a board. Is that?
It is, because there wasn't that formal structure there before, and I was trying to work out what would work best, and I'm confident this is a good way ahead.
But I think Councillor Ellis is asking about particularly the quality of the data and your plans to work with the Chief Constable to rectify or improve on that performance. I'm putting words into your mouth. I apologise, Councillor Ellis.
That'll be the question. What plans does the Commissioner have to ensure the force sorts its data integrity issues out?
Because we'll be checking that dip testing to make sure that the crime data is there. We've got a whole plan based on the Magistrates Inspectorate report on what we need to do to improve, and we're following that plan.
This is
Sharon.
You want to come in? Thank you.
I think just to give further reassurance to Councillor Ellis as well, so it's my role as monitoring officer to be responsible for ensuring there's good governance in place. So I've been very much behind the review of the governance and the establishment of the accountability board, just making sure that those conversations that were happening already are properly formalised and minuted, but also published, so that there is a much greater public visibility of what the Commissioner does, that holding to account piece, ensuring an efficient and effective police service in Nottinghamshire.
I couldn't find the accountability board on the website. Has it been published?
No, I've actually been off, so I've not had a chance to check the write-up, but it will be published next week.
I think the question that was in my mind on picking up Councillor Ellis's point, did the Inspectorate give any examples of centres of excellence in terms of where you might look for areas that are good in recording crime and quality assurance in that? Did they give you any sort of pointers as to where to perhaps go and look?
Yes, so the Inspectorate have provided some information. I think it's fair to say that the information that we've had from the force gives us quite significant reassurance about what they're trying to do in terms of trying to improve data integrity. So, for instance, they have got an action group that's been established in force that, and to repeat that phrase, that is all over this, but that is keeping a very close eye on it and looking elsewhere at those peers that it might learn from.
So what would you like to see, Councillor Ellis, at the next meeting? Some detailed analysis of the integrity of the data?
I think that'll be useful, either analysis of the data and or a summary of the plan to put things right.
Thank you. And then Councillor Khan, thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. I must congratulate the Nottinghamshire Police Force for coming second in the league table for answering calls. I must admit, when I listened to the national press, I was hoping that Nottinghamshire would be first, having seen your wonderful control room, and was quite surprised that, was it Avon and Somerset were mentioned in all dispatches, but not Nottinghamshire. So hopefully they will achieve that goal as soon as possible with your new control centre. But going back to the report, on page 53 there is a table 2A which points out that the response times for grade 1 calls have been relatively static. There is a deterioration in performance in respect of grade 2 response times. Now, Commissioner, has the Chief Constable provided you with a reason for this deterioration? That's what I've been... Table 2A. Sorry? Yes, it's the whole table.
Yeah, so we've never changed our outcome time. We've always kept it challenging. and despite other forces changing theirs, ours is an indication of an hour. And part of the reason with regards to that statistic falling slightly is due to the fact that the demand has certainly increased quite significantly over the 999 calls and the 101 calls. And also, unlike other places, we don't downgrade the call. So if it should be one of those type of call responses, even if the person isn't in, we'll still keep it as that, because that allows us to monitor progress over time. But it is, from my perspective, operationally, it's an indication of demand going back up. And obviously the focus is around the 999 responses.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. There's just one other point I'd like to ask about. On page 40, I was very surprised to read about the fact that you're introducing a new online chat service. As a member of Joe Public, I know nothing about it. And I was wondering if, Commissioner, you are actually going to promote this, because I think it'd be very useful for a lot of people to be able to communicate with the police on a different level.
Yeah. Thank you for raising that. It is going to be promoted. It's only just started, so we're just getting going with it. Just almost not testing it is wrong, but once it's ready to launch, we'll make a big shout about it.
I think that would be very useful to the public. Thank you.
Councillor Cole and then Councillor Edwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions. So we've seen increases in and around city centre, so in crime, so vehicle robbery, theft, knife crime. As a Nottingham City resident, obviously we've seen stabbings, so we've seen literally 6 stabbings, hear about 6 stabbings over a period of 8 weeks. So what are you doing to hold the Chief Constable to account in that kind of serious violence happening in the city? Also about what are we doing to manage public perception on this issue? That's one of the questions. Do you want me to, one by one? Just ask them all, okay. And then on page 39, paragraph 3.17, refers to an area for improvement highlighted by the peer review, consulting and engaging with diverse communities. So please, can you tell us what measures have been put in place to address this area of improvement, and about any transferable learning that is being incorporated within your office? And then, sorry, 2 more. On page 69, under promoting equal ops, it says the performance and insight report shows that there has been an increase of 17.5% increase in police recorded hate crime. So it's the kind of similar questions to what have been asked today. Given the criticism of the Peel report on the way crime is recorded, what confidence do you have that the figure is a fair reflection of the actual number of offences? Has the increase in hate crime led to an increase in community tension in areas of Nottinghamshire? And what are we doing to address them?
Thank you, Councillor Khan. I'll try and take them in order, if that's okay. I was also disappointed with the amount of knife crime, and we are doing a series of things. We have our violence reduction unit, we have the knife crime team, we're working, we've done the nighttime economy levy consultation, and we want to do more work together on that. I'm hoping it was just a blip. Nationally, there's been an increase too, but I can assure you that we are really monitoring that closely. And the public perception of it, I want to work with the media to make sure that it's not just all the negative stories that get reported, that positive ones do too, because when we get in these knife crimes, we're really getting some real quick arrests, but that always doesn't get shouted about. With regards to our diverse communities, I'm really excited that next week we've got our new community engagement new community engagement officer starting with us, and his first job will be to map our wonderful diverse communities in Nottinghamshire, because I'm aware we do need to do more, and I want to see how we can best reach out to our diverse communities, and that's to get their involvement, so they can get involved with like the accountability board, they can feed back to us. We need more engagement. With regard to also I'm very keen that our police force continues to represent and look like our wonderful diverse communities too. And I'm pleased we're making good steps in this area, but there's still more to do. But nationally, we are one of the most diverse police forces, representative of our area. With regard to hate crime, I actually saw it as a positive thing that we've had an increase in hate crime. Even now, I know that we're only scratching the surface and we're not getting everybody reporting, but that increase in hate crime, I'm hoping people have confidence to know that if they report a hate crime to Nottingham Police, it's going to be taken incredibly seriously. And actually, our hate crime victim support work is sort of really well, and there's a really high victim satisfaction rate. So I want more hate crime reported. It's something I've actually asked in my police plan for it to be more, not less. But I know we're still scratching the surface. And one of the things that the grants that we're doing for my Make Not Safe grants, I'm doing a grant around hidden harm and hate crime. So some people have already been told that they've got a good chance of getting it. As you know, I changed how I did the grants, that now we can do it for a longer time if you can prove that spending that money is going to make a real difference. So they've been told they've got a chance of getting the grant, subject to doing a really thorough theory of change. So we're doing work with some organisations now. But it's a really important area for me. Thank you for raising it.
Okay. Can I just come back on? So one of the questions was about, so you're saying it's a good thing that hate crime's being recorded, which I suppose it is, but about are we seeing community tensions as a result of that though? That's one bit. And then when you spoke about knife crime and the kind of concerns, the real concerning issue for me, and I'm sure it's for others as well, is I understand the nighttime economy, but this is, for example, young lads, 14-year-olds in broad daylight in the city centre stabbing somebody. I had one in my own ward, which again is 2 young people stabbing, and that concern about young people carrying knives in the first place. What are we really going to do that's going to change it? Otherwise, you know, when you talk to young people, they say to feel safe, they have to carry a knife. And it's how do we move from that perception over to real, when you know, young people feel safe that they don't have to carry a knife to be safe, and the police obviously lead on their work of keeping communities safe.
Yeah, and it's not just the police, it's schools and doing that massive preventative piece, which you know I'm really passionate about, and the work we do with the Violence Reduction Unit too. Chief, can I ask you to come here, because I know you're doing a lot more with knives.
Yeah, thank you. So the main answer to the question from an operational perspective is to take you back to that first point, really. And I'm glad that the CDP chair and the leader of the council has, you know, been engaging with us about that, you know, the whole media approach, because one has to reflect just how far we've come. So we are below the national and the regional average in knife crime. Every one of those knife crimes is one too many. And you're right, particularly when it does involve younger kids, it is concerning. I think in March we saw an increase. We made arrests on nearly all of those jobs, and they're working their way through the criminal justice process. They're not just young people, but there were a couple of jobs involving young people. And sadly, a couple of jobs where police officers received injuries too. But the main emphasis is on keeping the money in prevention, working with partners, trying to increase the number of cops. And I think with regards to young people's perceptions of safety, quite often I see that as a minority, not a majority, expressing the view that it's safer to carry, because statistically it's definitely not. But we need to influence all those groups and influence them quite differently. So for instance, we've got the schools officers in the secondaries, but we need, I think, collectively, partnership-wise, an increased push around the primaries and people coming through and going into secondary school. And then the last part of the square in the circle is to keep the pressure on with regards to what fuels some of that knife crime, in particular, the street dealing of drugs. And the Operation Reacher that we've got across the whole of the force has seen the number of individuals convicted, arrested and everything else and disrupted for drug dealing on the street to have increased quite significantly, and certainly compared to lots of other places across the region and nationally. And we need to keep going with that. But we can't arrest our way out of this issue, and I think everybody understands that. This is a health and a societal issue as well, but we need to keep working together to keep the pressure on and to keep the money in prevention.
Thank you. The violence reduction unit, there's something embargoed, but there's hopefully a good story coming out soon that we're going to be doing more. And also, as it's Volunteers Week, I just want a real big thank you to all those fantastic volunteers who are actually working with our young people to actually mentoring or sports clubs or all there's so many fantastic volunteers, not just in the violence reduction unit ambassadors, but our amazing third sector organisations and all those that volunteer to support, to give young people the right chances.
Thank you, Commissioner. Did you want to come back, Councillor Khan? Just one thing for clarity for me, and I apologise if I didn't capture this correctly. Can I just confirm, when you mentioned a new member of staff, Community Engagement Officer, is that in your office? That's right. That's right. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I'd captured that correctly. We have a lot of people waiting, so I beg your pardon. Councillor Edwards next, then Mr Bob Vaughan-Newton, then Councillor Greaves, Councillor Ellis, Councillor Introna and Councillor Smith. So we'll start, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. And it is good to see how public money can be used to deliver outcomes. And I so wish we had the money to sustain the wardens we had at 100. I so wish we were able to have the money to return the number of youth workers that we once had. I live in the city centre, have a dog. The dog has needs. I have to take the bags with me when I take him for his needs. And so I see more than people might expect, because the city centre is the dog's patch, and there's another resident lives in the city centre. He often meets his dog. That resident has had to deal with the aftermath of a murder, a member of the public punching in a window, and then breaking up a fight on Thursday. I didn't break up the fight. I was too busy ringing it in. I appreciate your telling me about the quick response times, etc., but it still takes me 3 minutes or so to relay all the information. But there was a guy being beat up by 4 others. But my gratitude and appreciation to my friend for actually deciding to intervene himself directly. I don't know if the chief would have a view on whether he should really have done that, but that's what he did. So we have this mix, don't we? This situation where I don't feel like the city centre as such feels more dangerous, but there have been more things going on. So we have work to do. Please keep the focus there rather than that. I do worry about people saying, oh, it's good that people get reassured by things. We've got to keep directing the resource and the service to solve the problem before it starts, or to deal with the problem, rather than assurance, in my opinion. I wonder if the Commissioner has got a view yet on the situation with drug use and with respect to football violence. You know, this is a question I raised at the last meeting, and that was before a Forest fan beat up a Sheffield player on the pitch. I just wonder if you have a view on that. And then on the section on page 57 on road safety, so happens a friend of mine was killed whilst jogging a few weeks back, a mother of 2, a former employee of the Greater Nottingham Partnership, so therefore worked for the city and county councils in her role, and a champion for women and women's rights. And I'm grateful for the advice that tells me it's not a straightforward story, so I can't say too much more about that, and won't. But I will say that I am so aware how road safety is a partnership issue. This thing about getting the speed down, it's a partnership issue. We've been on it for years in Nottingham City, and we've done some controversial things. People that, you know, shall we say the car driving public don't appreciate what we do, but we have got the city down to 20 mile an hour speed limit, something that is not instantly popular and something which we're criticised for, therefore, in our attitude to drivers. But we know we've got to get speed down. We know we need to do more, and you'll have to balance this, of course, in all the demands that you face about actually catching people and prosecuting people for speeding. But in the meantime, there's another £5,000 of my own budget going into more road safety signs on the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. We know we need this because that's our way of getting people to feel more confident about cycling and using e-scooters on the roads instead of on pavements. We know we've got to keep going on that. We know that time and again we have given roads over to the public and to the cyclists rather than having it to cars. The pressure and the stick we got when we said we're closing the embankment to through traffic because of the inconvenience it caused for drivers. But I'm now in a situation where one of my major ward's concerns was the speed of traffic on the embankment, and I don't have that problem anymore. So I just appeal to colleagues at the panel today to understand that in doing things to get the speed down, in doing things to reduce the number of fatal accidents and serious injury accidents, because you start, of course, by reducing the number of incidents at all in the first place. Just understand that when we've done these controversial things in the city, we have had these broader aims in our eyes, in our ambition, and you know, that is why we've been such a pro-cycling city, and it's why we've done so much to get people to use the bus and the tram. I'm sorry to hear about the news about the situation in Broxtowe, and I'm intrigued to follow up on that as well. But please understand the rationale behind our radical transport policies has included a heavy chunk of making our streets safer for people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to that, Commissioner?
Thank you, Councillor Edwards, and I'm really sorry about the tragic death of the lady that you mentioned. With regards to speeding on roads, there's about 100,000 people in Nottinghamshire every year who break the speed limit, and who are notice of breaking the speed limit, and out of those, about 40,000 of them are entitled to do a speeding awareness course. We're actually just recently brought in the speeding awareness course was done by an external contractor. It's now going to be done internally by Nottinghamshire Police. This will actually bring it means that we'll be getting a little bit of extra money for doing that, and some of that money will be going back to community safety for speeding awareness. Also, as part of the next round of My Community grants, there will be an opportunity for people to bid in if they wanted to do community speed watch. There'll be some funds made available for that. I'm absolutely committed to doing this.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Edwards? Sorry.
I did have 4 points, and I suppose the one that's really been missed is what's your understanding of what's happening with football violence?
I'm sorry, Councillor Edwards. I'm not an expert on football violence, and I think you potentially linked it to drugs, and it's not something I personally know about. There is a From Harm to Hope 10 years drug strategy, which has been brought out by the government, and there's big chunks of money that are coming down to councils and public health to work on that. And I'll just pass across to Sharon Cadelli, who's got making some notes, but I can't read them, so I'm just going to let you say them directly, Sharon.
Thank you, Caroline. So it was just to mention the commitments, or remind about the commitments in Caroline's Police and Crime Plan, which does talk about tackling drugs, tackling serious violence as well. And then there is commitment there in terms of setting up a strategic antisocial behaviour task force as well.
Chair, if I can come back. It's just, you see, the surprise for me with the formality that you've set up in your relationships with the police is whether it's losing you the opportunity just to find out what's going on, because instead you're tabling it, you're agendarising it, you're minuting it, and sometimes I would have thought you just want to have a chat with someone. And I know I've had a chat with someone, and I know I've got an opinion and an informed opinion at that. And I'm just a little bit surprised about the style of working. Now, you know, I sit and I will wait and I will watch and I will listen to see if it's a better way of doing things. But really, you know, I raised it at the last meeting, I've raised it again. I think by now you should have some kind of perception on what's happening with football violence.
Okay. Can I just come back to that? The accountability is something I'm doing extra and on top of what I was already doing. I've been down to the briefings and there's 280 officers being briefed on how they're going to handle a football match. I'm going out with police officers all the time, as well as meeting the senior leaders up with the police. I'm out there and I'm talking and I'm listening.
So what's your view?
With what reason?
With what's happening with the football violence. Have we got a situation to deal with that's new and challenging or not?
We have the last big match we had 280 officers going down to make sure things were kept as safe as possible. But
that's an operational matter. I'm asking you, what do you think's happening with football violence?
Okay, you don't want to come back, Commissioner?
I'm not an expert on football violence.
Is it something that maybe the Chief Constable could assist in?
So, listening to the debate, the issue nationally around football is very much a resurgence in the last couple of seasons, particularly post-lockdown and COVID, and in particular that link between disorder and cocaine. A couple of cases that seem to have hit the headlines in the last season and a half, I would say, around that. From our perspective, planning-wise, we haven't seen a real tangible link that I can point to, but from an operational perspective, we always plan in the resources against the risk. All the matches are risk assessed. We get information from clubs, we have spotters, and a reciprocal arrangement with every other police force in the UK. So whenever we do a match that involves one of our teams, we send a couple and vice versa, and that helps manage the risk. I'm really looking forward to some Premier League football in Nottingham, and yes, that will put some additional burdens upon Nottinghamshire Police, but it's burdens that we welcome with open arms because I think it's brilliant news for the city.
Thank you. Did you want to come back?
Well, just say hopefully we're better organised for the Leicester match this time round. All right.
It was commented that the person that assaulted somebody was actually arrested and brought before the court and sent to prison in record time a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you. I think at that point that sounds a good moment to move on. I still have an awful lot of people waiting, so I will get round to you. Thank you. Mr. Bob Vaughan-Newton next.
Thank you, Chair. Neighbourhood Watch, as an organisation in the UK, it started in the States, but in the UK it's got its 40th anniversary this year. Started in the village of Mollington near Chester, an area the Chief probably knows quite well. I've been involved with the management of Neighbourhood Watch for around 30 years out of those 40. And I've heard all sorts of reasons why Neighbourhood Watch shouldn't start in an area. That Neighbourhood Watch is curtain twitchers, it's middle class, middle-aged and meddlesome. I thought I'd heard it all, but now I discover that in Sutton in Ashfield, they think it's a police-led initiative, and that's a good reason for not taking part. I can't believe it. My recollection of Sutton in Ashfield Neighbourhood Watch, they had a very strong Neighbourhood Watch association, particularly in the late 1990s. They even had a shop in the shopping centre of Sutton in Ashfield, which was dedicated to Neighbourhood Watch, and people could go in and ask for advice. It was a brilliant place. Mansfield too. Mansfield's always had a very strong Neighbourhood Watch feeling. not as a police-led initiative, but a community-led initiative. And that's reflected by the fact that the CVS have been very effective in starting new neighbourhood watch schemes in Mansfield, as stated on pages 36 and 37 of the report. I'm just totally... I'm trying to look for a word that isn't gobsmacked, because I think that's a little bit too unparliamentary for this place. But I am totally disconcerted to hear that they're failing to have new neighbourhood watch schemes in the Sutton and Ashfield area because it's a police-led initiative, and we all know it isn't.
I'm also a massive supporter of Neighbourhood Watch, and we know, I spoke with David Griffin, who's one of the legends of Nottinghamshire Neighbourhood Watch. And again, another chance to say thank you to our fantastic volunteers who are running them. As well as Neighbourhood Watch, there's also the NOTS alert system, and they work really well together. So I want to encourage, if everybody here is signed up to NOTS alert, and encourage other people too. I think it was perhaps because we had our in Sutton and Ashfield, there were, police were going out and encouraging people to do neighbourhood watch. That's why they thought it was a neighbourhood watch was connected to the police. I'm not sure, but that was the feedback we got.
I'd echo the Commissioner's comments about the neighbourhood alert system. I'm a multi-scheme administrator on that particular system. I've been involved with Neighbourhood Alert for, I would think, about 15 years.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Greaves, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Not wanted to labour on about Workshop South in your evaluation. Just to say that could we at some time have a survey of Bassett Law, which obviously includes Retford, Harworth and Worksop, and can we have an evaluation of what's happening in their areas, also because it's Bassett Law is a third of Nottinghamshire, I may add. It's massive in area, lots of rural areas and lots of rural crime. So can I suggest that we also do a survey on them areas also? But that isn't my question. That was just a handout. The question was 4.5, fraud, online fraud. Now then, it says here that the Commissioner is exploring opportunities to promote a range of crime prevention tools. Now then, I would have thought where we are today, them tools would be out of the box and being used, because we're looking at a cost of living crisis that we probably have never known before. And along with that goes fraud on a massive scale, huge scale. And can I suggest that the tools are out of the box? Hopefully the exploring's been done, and now the tools are ready to come out the box and put in place, because there's more and more of online fraud occurring now. I mean, you say here 33%. I'm going to suggest that that's a tip of the iceberg, absolute tip of the iceberg, because there's a lot of people who get subject to fraud, especially the elderly, who are subject to fraud or afraid to admit it, that they've been subject to fraud. So that's only a tip of the iceberg. So can I suggest that those tools are took out the box with immediate effect, and hopefully the exploring opportunities have been done? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Greaves. With regard to the survey, we do a survey of the whole of Nottinghamshire, but we can share with you the Bassett Law. And Bassett Law is very important to me. When the Home Secretary came to visit recently, it was workshop that she came to see that the new CCTV cameras that we have there. With regard to fraud, it's a major part of my police and crime plan. We're putting extra resources into it. We're always going to have to try and keep one step ahead of the criminals. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was out at the Nottinghamshire show with the excellent Kirsty. I don't know what her rank is or surname, but she. Yeah. Police staff investigator, fraud prevention, doing the outreach work, and we're increasing that team. There's loads to do, but we are making a really good start on it. Do you want to say a little bit more about Kirsty, what she does?
Yeah, I think listening to the debate, the points are really valid. We're the 6th highest prosecuting force for fraud, but you're right, online fraud and the reports that we get from national fraud reporting continue to increase. And I think the element that you said around what are we doing on the prevention side, dedicated resources, particularly targeted towards vulnerable victims. So usually most of her work is done with older people who have been scammed. And then we also have reported an increase, and I think I've previously given the panel an update on some of the sort of dating scams that, let's say, more senior members of society have been susceptible to. And you're right, quite often they don't realise that they are a victim and are very embarrassed to admit that they are a victim. And we put a lot of time and effort into making sure we try and get the money back, but also to support those victims.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor Greaves? No, thank you. In that case, Councillor Ellis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to come back to follow up the discussion that Councillor Cowan started about diversity in the force. And I noticed from the Peel report that it does identify an innovative practice in recruitment. And I know we heard this when we came to force headquarters.
Yeah.
I suppose it's just disappointing that it's mentioned in the report but not highlighted. I think it probably ought to be highlighted more than it has been. But I want to follow up the comment about improving the engagement with diverse communities. And there's two aspects to my mind. And the first one is what's the Commissioner doing personally to support the Chief Constable in engaging with diverse communities. I mean, I don't think it's sufficient to say I'm recruiting an officer. I think the nature of this is that the communities would expect political leadership at a high level to be seen with them on a daily basis. And the second one, I want to follow the stop and search, which is related to that, is the stop and search. The report notes that there's been a reduction in what it calls reasonable stops and searches, whichever way it is, from 93% to 85%. Have you asked the Chief Constable what the cause of that is? But also, in 2014, all forces agreed to tighten up restrictions on use of stop and search, because we know how they can have an adverse effect on the community and damage the police's standing in local communities. And the Home Secretary recently announced that she wants to relax those restrictions. This is despite HMIC, FRS expressing their concern about proportionate use of stop and search, and the Equalities Impact Assessment identifying the risk of searches not being seen as legitimate and damaging the police's standing in the community. So you've got the two things, up to my mind, in opposite direction. You've got the Peel report saying we need to engage more with the communities, and we've got a direction of travel from the government going the opposite way. Have you had any discussions with the Chief Constable about the effect of stop and search and what the force's policy should be on stop and search? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. With regards to engagement, absolutely, I want to be, and I'm already engaging with our diverse commuters. Can give loads of examples, whether it's me going to break fast at Ramadan, to lots of just getting out there, meeting our diverse commuters, and that's the best bit of my job. I love it. And I will continue to do that. With regards to stop and search, yes, I have spoken with the Chief Constable about this, and it's a really important topic. We have an independent scrutiny board who actually do dip testing, random checks of the body-worn camera to make sure that the stop and search are done, and there's learnings from that when needed. If I could bring the Chief in for the operational point of view. Thank you.
Thank you. So the instructions to the staff are the same, they're unchanged from my perspective. So always has to be reasonable and proportionate. The numbers actually have come down slightly in the last 12 months, and the disproportionality has continued to come down. Compared to lots of places you'll see in the report, I think we're about 2.3% on disproportionality. I know there's certain places with core cities that are sort of 8-9%. So I think we're in the right area there. I think the issue you're trying to tease out is the sort of, this Section 60 approach. And just for reassurance, we hardly do any Section 60s. We operate on a very sensible, proportionate basis. Most of the stop searches that are done, and they're all dip sampled, they have to be signed off by a sergeant, and also that most of them are covered on body-worn camera. So wherever it's practicable, we can review them, which is a great thing for the community. And it's also great when we're being externally scrutinised, and it makes sure that standards remain high. So the personal issue of body-worn video that we did last year and a big refresh to response has really helped, and also it has on the knife crime team as well. So I'm quite, from an operational perspective, quite pleased with the way that we operate stop search and don't intend to change anything.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor? No?
No, I'm just pleased to hear that the practice isn't changing. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Introner, then Councillor Smith and Lee to follow.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report, very comprehensive, and with all things like this, there's positives and there's things that are not so positive. One of the things that I think everybody welcomes is the increase in frontline officers, and so that's warmly appreciated. May I just say, though, at the very end of the report, on page 61, there's the general topic of public confidence in the police. And being a relatively new member of the panel, I'm not sure what the historical numbers were, but I see that over the last year we've dropped below the 60% threshold. I do appreciate that that's a very generic statement, public confidence. I think we're certainly, from my experience, where you're talking to officers individually and PCSOs, they come across very professional and are very hard-working and caring. But it doesn't alter the fact that there's a number there that's a trend that's in the wrong direction. I just wondered where we think that number is before, I don't want to use the term alarm bells or anything, but in terms of where the threshold is before we start to say, look, we've really got to try differently or do something differently. And from that point, I do appreciate there's many facets of approach and within the plan. But if you were to choose one or two key strategies, and I would say that both as PCC and from an operational point of view, what would they be, and how best can we as local authorities support what you're trying to do? Thank you.
Thank you. Quite a lot there, Mr. Councillor Atrono. If I just go through the last two first, if that's okay. Two things I'm really passionate on is the preventative work and getting in younger with schools. That's something I'm desperate to do more of, and I have already got it in my plan. My great programme, the Good Relationships Are Equal and Healthy. That's tackling domestic violence, and it's something I'm really passionate about. So any support from anybody on that would be very welcome. And another thing that I'm keen to sort this year is the better support for victims. We've done the victim care needs assessment. We've got a really good idea of what kind of service we want to commission, and I'll be putting that out to tender in October. But making sure that our victims get the best possible care is really important to me. With regard to public confidence, I haven't set a number of where it needs to be to worry about it, because I'm worried about it already. It's disappointing that it's going down. Particularly, it's going down between 16 to 24-year-old women, and I don't know definitely why that's happening, but I think there's the Sarah Everard effect. There's the I don't know if anybody watched the drama, the documentary at the weekend, the two daughters talking about Nicole and I forgot her sister's name, Nicole and Bieber. When you're watching things like that on the telly, and it's all over the news all the time, it's not going to help confidence in the police, and I do worry that has a knock-on to how people feel in Nottinghamshire. So what we need to do is to have more messages that the police are doing a good job, that the police are going to be here to keep you safe and to lock the baddies up. And just really listen to our community and get out there as much as we can. But it is vital that we have those extra officers. We've got 2,380 officers now. I'm trying to get funding for another chunk as well. We've got an exciting military to police programme which we're piloting, and I'm trying to get some more funding for that. So I'm keen to get as many frontline officers, which I think will increase building the confidence. Anything to add, Sharon?
I think it's a fair point that was raised, and it was something that was reflected back to us recently when myself and the Chief Constable attended the Youth Commission's annual conference. Those lack of feeling of safety and lack of trust and confidence as well. I'll let the Chief Constable come in, but it was interesting when we did a bit of a reality check around that in terms of do you understand where Nottingham is in terms of its position nationally in comparison to Leicester, for instance, and Derby? Just how clearly that there is an effect on what people read and what people see in the media and so on young people's perceptions, and that was fed back to us quite a lot during that conference. It's certainly given us room for thought, in terms of the strategies that we use. But yeah, there's quite a lot of work for us to do. Do you want to come in, Craig?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that's a good question that you've asked, and it sort of corresponds with Councillor Khan's question about what more can we do collectively, from a city and a county perspective. I would estimate that if you were to ask that question slightly differently and say your local police versus policing, you would get a much higher level of local satisfaction. What we've seen nationally, and having spoken to colleagues, particularly after some of the events that we've seen reported in the Metropolitan Police, is that has a disproportionate impact on overall confidence in policing. And I think Sharon's right with regards to those feelings of safety. If you look at the statistics, it's gone down more, as the PCC said, for women post Sarah Everard. And I think that is an issue locally that we've always been relatively good at reassuring. But when something like that happens nationally, and one of your own police officers, as a member of policing, does something outrageous, that's bound to have an effect. That's very difficult to mitigate against, and quite rightly, everybody's repulsed by it. So I think overall, if it was a local question, we would be much higher. If you look at that trajectory, policing nationally had an increase in confidence during COVID, reported on a national basis. And it fluctuates, and it has here, around that sort of 55 to 60% for a good while. But I think going forward, bad news is easy to report, isn't it? And we find that quite often, but we want to work with both local councillors and you know, the city and the county council and the districts to make sure that we publicise the good news stories together. Because as you rightly say, there are lots and lots of really good aspects of feedback that we get. I get lots of letters, lots of emails about the good things that we've done, but they don't make easy local news, do they?
Thank you. I think we live in a more polarised society, and certainly on social media, it's very easy for, dare I say, some of the naysayers that we have out in our communities to get online and just moan about anything and not be interested in any good news. So I think that whatever you do from a positive point of view to reflect the good work that is done is always going to be helpful. I do take your point, though, Chief Constable, about local news. I think if you're looking at it locally, it is different. We all have our issues. We have some of our own issues that we're not happy about locally. We have some, you know, good things to report. And if you talk about young lady confidence out on the streets, I mean, we had some issues. We spoke to our local district commander, got a meeting with all the local councillors in Retford, in my town, within a few days. So, you know, we could see that it was being addressed. It was also an opportunity for some honesty about what's important and what's going to get focused on and what isn't. So I think maybe if there's a bit more proactivity around some of those type of surgeries, that would help too, and maybe just something to consider. But thank you for your responses.
Thank you. Chair, can I just could you indulge me for 1 minute? So when we went to the Youth Commission, I think this is really quite important to set it into context. We spoke quite a lot around what their feelings were of safety and their perceptions, mainly based on local media around the place, you know, Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. And it's, as chief, I really try and avoid sort of over comparisons with other places, but I tend to sort of say we're below the national average or we're below the regional average. But I asked a few really important questions and said, right, folks, so mainly kids in the room, do you think we have more or less knife crime than Derbyshire and Leicestershire and the UK? And they were all going, oh, we have more, don't we? You know, because we always have had. Well, the reality is we have less. We have less knife crimes. Yes, we've talked about a spike in sort of March time, but we have less overall. And I said, well, what do you think about murder then? Oh, well, we think that's really high compared to those other places. And the reality is we have one of the lowest rates in the country, despite our reputation from 20 years ago. And what about rape? Well, that would be high as well, you know, city centre and everything else. Well, no, that actually is lower as well than the regional average, than the national average. What about the number of people we prosecute for rape? Because that's been in the news recently, hasn't it? Yeah, I don't think we do very many of those. And the average is about 2, and we're running at about 8%. That's still, in my opinion, too low, but it's 4 times the national average. And then what about the serious violence? Because obviously with some of these statistics that we've talked about today, we're looking at, say, last year as opposed to 2019 and the overall levels of crime. We're actually below the regional average and we're below the national average in those statistics. That isn't sort of popular news, is it, very often? But there is that perception there amongst younger people that is an absolute misconception, and you can compare that on the incident data nationally as well. So I do want to do more, but it's how we do it in a way which sort of, you know, does it properly and enables people to understand and reflect. I think that's important.
Thank you, Chief Constable. I've got Councillor Smith, Councillor Lee, and then Councillor Inglis. Councillor Smith, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, I've just got 2. The first one is on the public confidence discussion, just going from that. Would it, I don't know how you collate the information, but do you have it by district, borough and the city? Because that might be something that's worth looking into, seeing if there's particular areas where people are saying that they've got, say, for example, just Ashfield, because it's me, Ashfield trust the police more than people in Mansfield say, or, you know, it'd be interesting to look at those statistics. And the other thing that I was going to come on to is assaults on police officers. Chief Constable, you mentioned officers being assaulted, and I know we had an officer was assaulted this weekend with an insulin pen. And just looking through very briefly what I've seen, in the last month there's been 6 officers actually been assaulted while on duty that's been put on your Facebook page. Now that's quite a lot in the space of a month. Now, is that a lot? Has it increased, or has the perception of it increased because it's going on social media? Is my first question. And my second one is, I know when I was younger there was a lot more respect for the police. Respect for police has decreased quite a lot. And this is probably more a question for Caroline. What are we doing to build those respect levels back up within communities? Because I do think that there is a problem. You used to see a police officer walking down the street, you used to run away. You used to be scared of him. Now, people stand and taunt him. What are we doing to bridge that gap, to bring people back together into a way that we can all live together and respect one another? Because that's just completely gone out of the window now.
Okay, I'll pass the first 2 on and I'll come back for the third if that's okay. Dan, could you ask about the specific around public confidence area?
Sure. Yeah, so this is something that we do track as part of the Police and Crime Survey, which we've been asking the same questions. I think it's about 8 or 10 questions around public confidence. Includes questions about whether you're treated fairly and with respect. So this kind of links into your other question. About police visibility, about whether the police are tackling local issues in your area. And then at the end of all those questions, it says there's on balance or overall, do you agree or disagree that you have trust and confidence in the police in your area? So again, it is all linked to your local police. We ask about over 4,500 residents across Nottinghamshire every year, and have done since 2017. So we've not only can we break that down by local areas and districts, we can also look at how trends have changed over time. That's shared every quarter with neighbourhood inspectors across the force area, and they use that information to inform their discussions with community safety partnership leads. So that's all information that's being shared among partners. And yes, again, if it's of interest, it's something that we can make available. Certainly a breakdown by local area or district.
Joe, if we could ask for that information to be part of the next meeting, that would be really handy, if that's okay with everyone.
That's fine, yeah, fine by me. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, thank you,
Oh.
and then Councillor Inglis.
So they've increased nationally and they have locally. Thankfully, the level of seriousness has only increased in a few of the cases, but we've got much better at reporting them, and then obviously the welfare support around the officers is much better than it was back in the day, so to speak. So from our perspective, it enables us to monitor and do more, but you've always got to balance how much of that you share with the media versus how much you keep that internally.
Thank you. My apologies on that. Thank you. Councillor Lee first, and then Councillor Inglis. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been drawn out by Councillor Edwards' comments about the football, so I thought I would start by congratulating Nottingham Forest in being promoted to the Premier League. My questions are, with Nottingham Forest now in the Premier League, we're obviously going to see a massive increase of the amount of people coming to games, as well as the massive amount of travelling fans, especially with what we saw in Paris recently, with tens of thousands of people travelling there without tickets and the fraud around the sale of tickets. Has yourself got any initiatives that you're looking at maybe directing to fans or the young people that attend fans, not just at Forest, but also at County and other stadiums and games around the county, being able to show people the dangers of fraud when it comes to football, drugs, criminality, but also engaging in a positive manner with the police and the community, where we're going to see massive amount. And obviously, I'm the district councillor and I'm here for Newark and Sherwood. I obviously have concerns with travelling fans that may change trains in Newark and travel to Nottingham. Will there anything be around the travelling fans across the county to make sure they're getting to the game safely and they're leaving after games, after they've had a great time, hopefully lost to Forest, even though I'm not a Forest fan, and making sure they get home safely?
Thank you. Whilst, as I've said before, I'm no expert on football. I'm surrounded by people who have a plan around this. There's actually a football, I don't know what they're called. Is it football? There's a team, isn't there, who deal with the football completely. I met them because we're on the balcony at Forest last week with them. Yeah, there's a whole team that do this, and they look at the look at all the planning down to the minute detail. There will be, for the Premier, the chap I was speaking to, he was saying normally there's 2,000 away fans. They're expecting there's going to be 4,000 away fans. They're already starting to make plans around it, but it's operational, so I'll pass over to the Chief.
So yeah, we plan all the games, and sitting at the back, we're all goal commanders for football, and the Deputy Chief Constable is one of the international commanders as well for the England matches. So experience-wise, we've got a fair bit. We've just we're looking forward to some Premiership action, as most of the local population are. But on a serious note, when we plan with British Transport Police. So we look at where the other fixtures are locally and nationally, where our home teams are, where our local teams are away, likely pinch points, start times, etc., etc. The overall number of people won't really change because Forest have had fairly good gates for the last season. It's just the mix will change slightly, so there will be more away supporters coming, but again, they come with their own football officers from their host force, and we speak to them on a regular basis, and it's a reciprocal arrangement.
Appreciate the explanation, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know, Commissioner, what a waste of a seat when you don't really know anything about football, and I'm sitting here thinking I could have taken that seat. Forgive me for a moment. Councillor Inglis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to tell you I've got 3 points I'd like to raise. First, on rural crime, I can take you back to 4.6 on page 40. Of the reference areas to the range of measures you're introducing for the police and partnership working for the rural crime. Can you give us an update on the rollout of these measures and provide information on what has been delivered so far?
And we have the new rural crime plan that's been headed up by Heather Mealer. I'm delighted with how well it's working. In fact, other forces are now looking at Nottinghamshire to how Nottinghamshire have integrated their rural crime offer throughout their force. It's not a little add-on, it's integrated. Right from the first point into the control room, we've now got dedicated point of contacts who understand and get what rural crime is. They're being trained by the NFU, a gentleman called Andy, the regional guy for the NFU, who's training them. We've had volunteers come through for all who want to do that. We've got new rural beat officers in the different areas. They've got more equipment. I don't know whether the 4x4s, I think one of the 4x4s has arrived. I think there's another one coming. They've got extra equipment, and they've had some fantastic joint operations regionally. In fact, I don't know if you can mention one of the big ones that's happened.
Yeah, we've done quite a big job with Leicester and Lincolnshire and South Yorkshire, both on theft of plant equipment and handling stolen property. That's going through the court at the moment on quite a large conspiracy. And then on top of that, we've been supporting quite a few operations along the A1 corridor, specifically linked around fuel thefts and then damage to crops. So the training itself has been done by a third party, NFU, so that's gone down really well with stakeholders. But also what we've done is increase local knowledge across all of those neighbourhood policing teams that share the geography on a big rural scale. One vehicle has arrived. There is a bit of a national shortage with getting older vehicles, as I think I've briefed you on before, but the money's there, they're ordered, and they'll come in due course.
Yeah, that's brilliant. In fact, I had the honour of actually attending one of the warrants that served on that operation a couple of weeks ago. And it's something that is really working in Rushcliffe, is the liaison between the neighbourhood team, you know, and I'd like to give thanks to Inspector Rob Lawton, Sergeant Sarah Merrill, and to Sergeant Brett Price, their work is incredible. It's really good now, we're engaging, and they are taking into local issues and dealing with them. So I'd just like to thank them for their efforts. I'd just like to, on the second point, just go back to something the Chief had said earlier about school liaison, where, you know, we're looking at the senior schools and everything. And I was interested in hearing that we're looking at primary schools now as well, which is something I'd really fully support, because I think they're the children we need to be aiming at now. You know, once they get to secondary school, they've got the peer pressures, they've already developed their own attitudes and everything. So if we get into them younger, we're going to get that respect and that discipline back. That that was gone. So I think that's something to look forward to and to, you know, to support for probably the next budget. Really good. And the third one was the misconception. The Chief again spoke about the younger people not really understanding what the true figures are and the true crime rates and everything. And again, it's something I said at the last meeting, where we're looking at what the media are publishing, you know, and I'm bouncing it back to the media again, that these headlines are sensationalised for clickbait. There was that tragic incident at the weekend at London on the bridge, where one of the reports was man dies after being electrocuted by police. It's not really reflective of what happened. It's not good for the police. It's not good for the community. So, you know, I just want the media to take on now that, report it properly, please. Thank you.
I agree. I'd like the media to report things fairly and not build a lack of trust. It's not helpful.
Thank you. Any final questions from members at all? Councillor Khan.
It was just following on what's been said. So one of them was just to look at page 51, 1C, preventing violence against women and girls. The use of stalking protection orders remains low and has fallen over the last year, despite a 10.6% increase in police recorded stalking and harassment offences. I'm not really one for percentages, but that's an increase of 1,114. So I'd like to know what's actually happening there. And then, sorry, I just had another question. Last question was, so we've all spoken about, well done, you know, police officer numbers are going up, but on page 53 at the bottom, it talks about officer strength has increased over the last 12 months, while staff and PCSO strength have seen a decrease. And I know in my local neighbourhood, you know, you see more PCSOs than you do officers, because they're out dealing more with the complex kind of issues. So again, why and what we're going to do about that?
I'll half answer this question, then I'll pass on to the Chief if that's okay. I asked the same question about stalking protection orders because I didn't understand, because I know they have a real focus on stalking in our force, and actually we're having a stalking conference later this year, aren't we? I'll let the Chief do the technical bit, but rather than going to stalking protection orders, that they're using better use of DVPNs and DVPOs, and I'll let the Chief explain why, but I was really satisfied when he explained it to me. With regards to staff and PCSOs, some staff and PCSOs have now become warranted police officers. Okay. But I pass over to you. Oh.
So stalking, yes, a lot of the increase in stalking that we've seen has been due to the crime recording issues that you mentioned earlier on, because we have to record each event. So when we get a first disclosure, that normally includes 2 or 3 other events that we have to record as well as crimes. So the overall approach that we've got is more of pushing for bail conditions and domestic violence protection orders wherever possible, whilst we've got them in custody. The stalking prevention orders are actually, our force legal department go and undertake that, and that is quite a complex route to navigate, takes longer, and it's quite a high threshold to get those on. So we reserve those for the highest risk cases, but what we try and do is put the bail conditions on and get them charged wherever possible at the earliest opportunity, rather than letting things languish. And in terms of recruitment, yes, the Commissioner's right. The numbers of PCSOs dipped slightly, only very slightly. They're actually when this report was done, that it didn't take into account we've just taken a new intake on of 19, so we're actually over, if the truth be told. And police staff numbers have continued to increase as per the uplift as well. So we're doing quite well from recruiting within, particularly some of our graduate investigators. I think I briefed the panel last year. We had about 24 of those with good degrees, came in, trained them up as investigators, put them through the same processes, and then pushed them towards being fast-tracked to DCs. And we've just seen a cohort pass out last week, and there's some exceptional people on there. Whenever you do that, you have to wait for the next lot to top them up. We've got good plans for that, though, so all heading in the right direction on recruitment.
And probably just to add, you're pinching our PCSOs in the city as well who are going to the offices. So.
All welcome, Nagat, all welcome.
Because we want to keep the PCSOs at the same level. We're not looking to reduce the PCSOs.
It's the price of good progress, isn't it? That you lose some. Any other questions? Councillor Greaves.
Yeah, just one quick one, Chair. I see no mention in the report here of our drone team. Have we got any success stories from as drone team for rural crime at all? Thank you, Chair.
I've been out with the drone team, with the chief drone pilot, watching them do the rural crime operations, and I think they were a key part of the work, aren't they?
Yeah, in terms of specifics, yeah, particularly we use them on the rural stuff and urban stuff for searches for vulnerable missing people. They're always out and about. There's two teams, so 24/7 we have a drone available. Most of the time we have two drones available, one city, one county. They are brilliant compared to what we had before. And yeah, we still have the helicopter, and we ask for the helicopter, but the drone's there instantaneously. So specifics mainly are around vulnerable missing people, because it helps us find them, and burglaries. So when we've got an area contained, we get the drone up, and as you've seen on some of those interceptor programs, it gets there pretty quick, gives you a great view, and off you go. And we also used it on all the warrants for the rural crime stuff as well, with regards to those stolen property warrants that we did, that you just spoke about, and I think you went out with them.
Thank you. I thought all the drones were in London for the Jubilee, according to the media. Councillor Carlton.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'd just first off like to start with a thank you to the Commissioner and Chief Constable for the tour that we had of the new Joint Force headquarters alluded to by Mrs Harding earlier. I thought it was really informative, slightly mind-blowing, and I personally would like one of those desks that go up and down. Obviously, one of those sort of key decisions behind that was to drive efficiencies within the force. But obviously, given the inflationary pressures that we're all facing, I was just wondering if an update could be given in respect of that in relation to the police force. And the second one is for the Commissioner. Obviously, on the 27th of April of this year, the Justice Committee published their report asking the government to do more to improve capacity in courts. Obviously, we all recognise that the police do the hard bit, and obviously then there's that second part with the judiciary. I was just wondering what sort of progress has been made on that, what conversations that you've had, and if the system, so to speak, is turning quicker. Thank you.
I'll do the last one first, because I understood that question. I wasn't sure if I got the first one, sorry. The justice, we have a local criminal justice board, and there is ridiculously long backlogs, and we're doing all we can to put pressure on to change that. Because I'm just really aware that until you get to court, you know, the victims can drop out the system, and it's people are waiting too long. So we're as an Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, with our parliamentary colleagues, we're all lobbying to get things better there. Can I check what you meant about efficiencies? Is it a question for my chief CFO?
it probably would, on that basis. What was really obviously the decision behind that was obviously the efficiency side, but obviously given the inflationary pressures that we're all facing, is that sort of making that go off target, or are we still on there, or how is the picture?
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. In terms of our initial plans, we planned, as in the annual budget report, it showed a saving of around about £400,000 from our changes to our estate. Predominantly, that has come from the shared income that we will get from fire as a result of the joint operations. So that is all in plan. We had made some assumptions around inflation in terms of the estimates, but as you're probably all aware, even though we put sort of what I thought was quite high figures of sort of 5 to 10% increases in there, the reality has been somewhat greater. So that will be a negative impact on our spend. What I will say is, if you look at the overall spend of the force, we spend nearly £250 million. It's a relatively small element of our expenditure. This is going up quite disproportionately compared to what we have. So the impact overall is quite minimal. But certainly we are experiencing those pressures, and both in fuel, oil, petrol as well.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Carlton?
Not necessarily on that point, but just again to finish with a thank you. Certainly over the last 4 days, while we've all been celebrating the Jubilee celebrations, and certainly over here I've eaten far too much cake and almost had to declare a public health emergency. But on that basis, obviously again, we're ever so grateful to those serving officers that had to work during the Jubilee celebrations, and I'd be grateful if you could take that back.
I will definitely take that back, Councillor Carlton. And also, it's not just the serving officers, it's our specials. The specials were massively out in force at all the community engagement events I went to. There was lots of specials there. And thank you for mentioning the visit to Forces headquarters. If I could just bring, I think you met Pulp Friction, who are the wonderful community interest company that do the canteen for us. And actually it would be remiss of me not to mention that the CEO, Jill, has also got an MBE in the recent birthday honours. So.
Thank you. And Jill's surname for the record? Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Mrs. Delby, thank you.
Mine is just a remark, not a question really. I think the panel would want to pass on its good wishes to PC Nick Lewis, who's been shortlisted for a National Bravery Award, having thrown himself into the Trent twice to save members of the public. So hopefully that's a good news story that will hit the local press. So I just hope that's noted.
Thank you. If there are no further questions then. Yes, Councillor.
I don't know if it's in order to ask about the Chief Constable's remarks about the Met Police reputation, whether he got any comments on Partygate.
I'll just go no comment on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. I was almost ready to step in there. Thank you. Yes, I'm sure most people probably want to get home to hear the evening news, I'm sure. Can I thank everyone? I declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody, for this afternoon. Thank you.